Hello everyone, welcome back to the Blokes podcast. I'm your host Ryan Hassan, joined by Nick Sutherland from Myndfit. Nico, how are you, mate?
I am very, very at peace at the moment.
At
It's
peace.
winter in Australia. I know you're in Thailand, but it's winter down here, and it's bright blue, sunny days and amazing sunsets, and it's just a very peaceful time. I love the change in seasons. I couldn't live in Thailand where I have, but it's the same all the time. I love the change. Um, and I love listening to people complaining about the weather because I just hear how much suffering they're
It's
creating
your
for
favourite
themselves.
thing, isn't it?
That is, but I hear it this morning. I was at Pilates this morning, and the Pilates instructor said, "Oh, wasn't it cold this morning? It was so hard to get out of bed." And I was like, do I, don't I? I'm like, yeah, fuck it, I will. I'm like, do you realise every time you say how hard it is, you're just wiring your brain to make it even harder for next time? And she's like, am I? I went, yep, that's what's happening. So,
Yeah, the change of seasons. Well, I'm at peace also, but I'm very excited. I'm peaceful and excited because we have an international guest today.
our first.
First international guest, that's right. We have Jose from We Are All One Story. Jose, welcome to the Woke Blokes podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. I'm at peace as well, so I'm going to go on and join that party.
The peace party.
The peace
Awesome.
party. Yeah.
How's America's not in peace at the moment, though, is it? Or is
You
it?
know,
Or what's...
America is beyond a doubt not in peace right now. There's no arguing that.
I saw
me,
this
my-
post. I've been off social media, dude, so I didn't even know that a man was killed. I didn't know that there was riots.
Yeah.
I'm the definition of living under a rock. But I did jump on social media quickly the other day, and I saw this tweet, I think it was, and it was with everything that's happening in America right now. It's like they've been cursed. It's like they're on top of an Indian burial ground. Oh wait, hang on. ... And I was like, wow, just bring even more racist issues into a situation where
Right.
there's already a lot there.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty intense. What's that? If you want to dive into what's going on right here stateside, yeah, there's a lot of civil unrest. There's a lot of protesting, rioting, and rightfully so. So, a lot of times, I think personally, we know change looks like, if we're talking just in your own person, that looks chaotic from the outside looking in. I think right now in America, we're seeing that change as a nation, and right now it looks chaotic, but we'll come out on the other side, better than we were, then. So
We spoke
yeah,
about this on last week's podcast about change and do we need to riot? Do we need to have a violent reaction? Like you look at Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and all these agents for change, and they're all promoting peace and
Right.
and all that sort of stuff. So, does one way work better than the other, or do we have? Is it? I don't know.
Ideally what we want is the peaceful change. But like if I want to compare the change with the nation within the change of a person, it's almost the same. We want the change within ourselves to be peaceful, but oftentimes it's not. It looks actually like chaos, whether that's an addiction, whether that's fighting depression, whether that's fighting anxiety. It's tense, it's intense, and when you're going through that, that's when you finally figure out something's not right. And that's what we're going through as a nation right now. There's the rioting, there's the unrest, there's the anxiety, there's the uncertainty. And at the very least, we can agree that something's not right and that something needs to change. How that
It all
change goes
sounds
about.
fear-based, though. It all sounds fear-based, and the way that I'll work, and Hass, I think, is a bit similar, is sort of surrendering, and it's an interesting one, because when you want to change, you can either try and force change, and people think that if you surrender and just go with the flow, then the bigots and everything are going to stay in power and everything. So I think it's a really interesting topic because I'm very Buddhist in my approach to things, and sort of go more into surrender. And listening to you say when you're fighting depression and you're fighting anxiety,
Right.
I tend to do the opposite. I observe them and surrender and let them go. So
I
interesting
agree.
choice
I
of
agree.
words.
And in my experience, I surrendered to God. And when I finally surrendered, the fighting stopped. Me fighting on my own, yeah, there's it's like beating my head against a wall. So I agree with that fundamental belief and that premise. But, it's hard to apply that premise to a nation where, there is a lot of police brutality and there is a lot of violence, and a nation that fosters violence. So, ideally, yeah, we want people to have that change peacefully and that surrender without having to go through the fight. But what just so happened, what's happening right now is that right now people are going through that fight. And I think, I agree there does need to be a moment of surrender and all those things. But to do that as a nation is much more difficult, I think, than to do it as a person.
There's a lot more moving parts there.
Yeah, a lot more moving parts.
We can't imagine what it's like. We're on the outside looking in, obviously, and
Yeah.
my girlfriend and I wanted to go to the protest in the city in Melbourne last weekend, but we decided not to because of coronavirus, and we didn't want to, be part of that. But we heard it was a very peaceful protest, but we've heard there's been very unpeaceful protests all over the world. So yeah,
Right.
But I think it's mostly peaceful. But then when you get there's such large groups, then a subset of people who are like into crime and everything see it as an opportunity to loot, and then they're the ones, this small subsection gets all the media attention. So I think it looks like there's more chaos when actually it's probably 98% peaceful.
Actually, me and my brother Ralph, we went to a protest, and that's what we saw. We saw, on the ground, in person, we saw, not only did we see the chaos, we felt the chaos. We felt, just negative emotions, and I'm pretty in tune with my feelings these days, and it was intense. I was like, this doesn't feel like love. But it's just like you said, I also, from my own eyes, I was able to see that within that protest, there's multiple different agendas. And that's where the chaos comes in, that there wasn't that unity within the protest I was at. Not all protests are like that. There are more peaceful ones, but you're right. There's some people in there who just want to riot, some people who just want to loot. There's some people who are just mad at the world who are there.
Yeah.
But there are some people there who do want justice and do want change. And it's sad that the other agendas get more airtime versus the actual cause and the actual mission and the actual issue at hand. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of moving agendas and moving pieces, and it's much more complex. It's as complex and as dynamic as it gets, especially
100%. Yeah,
and
totally.
And you're dealing with base human emotions, and you're dealing with mob mentality, and you're dealing with energy, as you were talking about. That energy just creates a groundswell, and you can get so easily caught up in it, no matter what your belief system or what your agenda is. If everyone around you is overriding that with different energy,
it's intense. Yeah,
100%. We're talking about energy. Let's talk about some good energy, Jose. Let's talk about We Are All One Story. Why don't you tell the listeners what We Are One Story is and how it all started?
So what We Are All One Story is, what me and my brothers do, we travel the U.S. and next year we plan to travel internationally. But we go to and we just listen to people's stories, and we then publish their stories on our social media outlets, which would be on our YouTube channel and our Instagram at We Are All One Story. We feel that in this day and age that it's easy to lose sight of the value in your own story, that it's something that we know that is true. We know that our story has value, but we're not reminded of it enough. We don't hear it enough. And we just go around reminding people like, hey, your story matters. We want to listen to it, and we want to hear what you have to say, because what you have to say matters. And that's pretty much the gist of what we do. How that started is, that's a pretty intense story in of itself. I myself lost the value in my own story to the point where I wanted to take my own life. And, by the grace of God, I made it out of that. But that's where it came from. Like, I didn't see the value in my story. I thought my life didn't matter. I thought my story didn't matter. I thought nobody cared. I thought nobody loved me. And finally, I was just like, my story means something, if for the basic reason, because I, as a person, have value. That's enough reason for my story to mean everything. And, I hung on to that idea and I cling to that idea, and we just go around telling people that and listening to and sharing stories. So,
That's so beautiful. I love that. I love that. Why don't you tell people maybe what led you to be in that dark place? Like, I know there's stories of being in a street gang, being in prison. There's a lot there, but maybe, what led you to thinking that your story doesn't have meaning?
I think it was a culmination of events. I think when I hit that deep depression, it didn't just happen overnight. It didn't just happen per se even that year. It happened throughout my life, throughout from my childhood to my adulthood. And there were, big factors as a kid. My mom was extremely disciplinarian. Like, she didn't spare the rod. She was, hey, you mess up, I'm going to beat you with a stick, a cord, anything. And at a young age, I still held on to love, but I just really started numbing myself, and I started just, kind of disassociating myself with, affection and emotions. And that carried on into my early teens, where, I joined a gang at 16, and in that gang, I thought, that it was love, because I didn't know any better. Growing up poor and growing up in a dysfunctional home. My dad's gone. My mom is an extreme disciplinarian, but she's also not affectionate. I don't know. I have no clue what love looks like. And when I saw the street culture, that felt like love to me, guys.
Connection, yeah?
Being willing. Yeah, a connection at the very least. A connection.
I was thinking
we're all kind of
belonging,
Yeah, the belonging, the connection, the camaraderie, except that all those things came with a price.
I think a lot of guys
price.
get that in joining the army, and I think one of your brothers was in the army. I think a lot of people who join the army have had a tough childhood, tough upbringing as well, and they get that sense of camaraderie, that sense of brotherhood.
Yeah.
But looking from my experience in the army's like a big gang as well. Some pretty shitty rites of passage and initiations.
Got guns.
It's just a legal gang. That's all it is.
Yeah, indeed.
It's interesting what you said before about the finding your value, and I love that you've come into that. I had a client last year, and she was a paramedic, a first responder, and she had this belief system that she had no value. And I said to her, all right, so does a child with an intellectual disability, do they have value? They can't read or write or anything. She goes, well, yeah, of course I have value. And I said, okay, does someone who's murdered someone, they're in prison, do they have value?
Yeah.
And she said, well, yeah, they have value. And I said, why do they have value? And she said, well, because they're human. And I said, and I had her in that moment. I said, do you have value? And she's like, oh, fuck. It's got me.
That's the moment. That's the moment, isn't it? It's like, I guess I do. I've told myself that I didn't for my whole life, but I guess I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So everyone else is allowed to have value, but not her, was her story. So,
right.
And I think we're also devalued by everyone else's opinions and beliefs so much. We're not allowed to share our story, especially as men. I don't know what it's like in the States, but in Australia it's very harden up, have some concrete, don't be weak, don't speak about things, don't show emotions.
Yeah, indeed. And the biggest prison is the one in your own mind. And how do you stay in that prison? By not talking to other people about your issues. You're trapped within your own head, and to try and navigate a deep depression and navigate it on your own, I mean, you're set up for failure. Like it's as men, we feel we can't talk to anybody, just like you said. But you're just building more of that wall within yourself, and it's a trap. And when I was going through my depression, I never knew about mental health or mental awareness. I had no freaking clue what was going on. I just felt horrible. And, luckily I have a faith system that I was able to cling to keep me here. But people who don't have, if you don't know what's going on, it's almost like it's set up for you to fail. And I don't know why people don't talk about mental health awareness more, because by you feeling comfortable talking about what you're going through, that literally will save your life.
Yeah. And I mean, mental health's everything.
That's what Ryan and I are all about. Is if you've got a body, you've got physical health. If you've got a mind, you've got mental health. And we're just trying to change the perception that people have around this whole mental health.
Yeah.
There seems to be so much shame because people relate mental health to anxiety, depression, suicide, bipolar, schizophrenia. They're talking about mental health issues and mental illness.
Yeah.
And there's such a misunderstanding that happiness and peace and joy is all part of mental health as well.
Mm.
Yes. Yeah,
and I think it was so important what you said there about us guys. You know, we internalize and we keep putting up these walls, and then funnily enough, nothing gets better when we internalize. And then we get to a point when we're 25, we're 35, however old we are, and we've got so much walls around us, and we're struggling so much that even when we come to the realization, I need to speak or need to let someone in, we don't know how, because we've got so many walls around us, we can't even see that it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we're not taught about our feelings either, if we don't have a parent who's emotionally intelligent and can help us to learn what it is we're experiencing, we're not that ignorance around our emotions is going to be a barrier to talking as well. Like, how do you feel? And everyone just says good or okay.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm great. I'm great, right?
and like Ryan at the start said, how are you, Nico? And I said, and I actually take time and how I'm feeling. I'm feeling at peace. That's how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about, Jose. There's a couple of things I want to talk about, but I really want to get to this maybe light bulb moment for you. Like, what was that moment where you just said, fuck, I actually have inherent value, this simple truth that I knew as a child? When did you get reminded of that?
I mean, when I was crazy, I mean, it's out of this world, but to even think about it, when I think about the whole depression and all that, it was like, I just wanted to kill myself. And man, I'm holding on to anything. Like, people don't understand the power of kind words. Like, someone tells me something, I was holding on to that for that day.
Did you want to end your life? Or did you want to end your suffering? Did you want to end your life, or did you want to end your suffering?
That's a great question. Probably the suffering, which I connected with my life, because I felt that, the suffering was, punishment for the crimes I had committed, for the life that I had lived, for because where I'm from, most of my friends are either dead, in jail, drug addicts, and there's not too much of a future. I feel that I escaped that for some reason. And then during the depression, I felt, well, you thought you escaped. Little did you know, this is your punishment. This is how deep it was. And I just wanted to get out of it, and I thought that the only way to get out of it was to end my life. Because then the anxiety was, I didn't know what anxiety was before, but I experienced where my whole body is tense and my stomach is curled inside, and I feel like I can't breathe and my thoughts are racing, and I just felt like I just wanted to end. And I just looked at my life and I was like, man, this doesn't mean anything. And I just remember what my mom told me as a kid. She was like, hey, you'll always mean something because you're a person, because you're still a creation of God. It doesn't matter what you've done, what you do, you always have value just because of who you are. And that's what I clung to, because I grabbed onto that and I haven't let go of it. But yeah, man, it was something I'd never experienced before. I felt like I was a pretty tough guy, and I just felt like, man, this battle in my head is just beating me up every day.
The mask is a tough guy on the outside.
Yeah.
We talk about it all the time, how it takes more strength to open up and to let go than it takes to stay shut off and closed off. So as men, we've got this irrational belief that strength is all about no, I'm fine, I'm okay, bury my head in the sand. But the real strength
Yeah,
comes in what you guys are doing now, and it
Yep.
comes in, opening up and sharing your story and helping others to,
Oh, it's them
share
taking
their
off the
story.
mask and then having people take
yeah,
off their mask, because the more people that take that mask off, it gives everyone else permission to do the same, and that's kind of this
exactly.
positive
Yeah,
ripple effect. And there's something really important you said there about when you were in those really dark times and you were trying to cling to anything, and is it just someone saying something nice? I got a friend, Matt Runnels, shout out to him, runs Mindful Oz down here in Melbourne, and one of the things he says is just fucking smile at people, right, on the street that you
yeah,
walk past. It may not mean anything to you, but
yeah.
you never know what that person's going through.
And
Because
it's
I know
true.
it's true. Because if we're someone's suicidal or deep depression, just seeing someone smile at them that they're not expecting, that's something they can maybe cling on to for that day or that week. That hey, the whole world isn't bad.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And what's it like for you to sit here now, Jose, having come from the depths of those lows to now being vulnerable and open and sharing and helping other people to be open? How does it sit within you personally to sit here going, wow, I've
I
gone
mean,
from here to here?
how does it feel? It's
Yeah,
night and day. To go from wanting to take your own life to waking up every day appreciating life. I mean, it's night and day.
Mm.
It's unreal. Like I told my sister, I was like, man, this is like from how I was, and I venture to say I felt numb for a great part of my life since, like I'm just based on how I grew up. And I feel like I get to experience the world like a kid again, believing
yeah,
and looking for the good in people and not thinking everybody's out to get me and not thinking not letting negative thoughts run rampant. It's actually amazing how I feel now. And I told my sister, like, it's too good to be true. And she just told me she said, well, it is true. So just get used to it. Keep on going.
I like the sound of her. I like the sound of her.
So it's night and day. It's amazing. It's
And was
like,
part
I
of
feel
your
like,
journey forgiving yourself? Was there a moment where you had to sit down and forgive yourself
of course,
for your past?
of course.
And for your, yeah.
I mean, my journey, like, I feel, was more spiritual than anything, but I feel like, I did go to prison. I got a 5-year sentence, and out of those 5 years, I did a little over 4. During that, I had a lot of resentment towards my mother. But during that time in prison, I got to talk to, other friends who were in there. And to be honest, like, I got to see that it's all relative. And I finally realized, like, my mom's going through her own stuff, and she did raise 6 kids on her own. And I focused on the good with her. And I didn't make a plan getting out of prison, but what I did do, I was able to forgive my mom and stop blaming her for stuff. But then I still had my dad, who I still held like it was a process. So it wasn't just, I was like, okay. So now, but I ended up I paroled. I was on parole for 2 years in LA. And then I was just getting sucked back into the gang culture. Like, once you're in it, I went back to my environment, and that was a trap in and of itself. My dad reached out to me, who was an absentee father. He said, son, you can come live with me. I don't care. I took him up on that offer. As much as I hated to, I felt that I had to. And, getting to know my dad and living with him, I just finally, that was another moment that took years. I lived with him for 3 years, and I just, regardless of him not being there when I was a kid, he wanted to be there now. And I can't deny that he loves me. However, whatever happened, and that was the level of forgiveness for him. And, but when I went through the depression, I was just, how do you forgive yourself? That's the last person I need.
With you, it sounds like you've reached this level of emotional maturity, and this emotional intelligence came through, and it is so big a part of the process to stop being a victim, stop, this happened to me, this is my story, this is how I was treated, my mum didn't do this, my dad didn't do this, the blame, judge. I had to do the same with
There's
my dad.
There's a whole lot of it,
Yeah. And I remember the day where I finally stopped and I went, all right, let's stop making this about me. Let's make it about my dad. All right, he was undiagnosed bipolar or manic depression. He was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And I spent some time in his shoes and looked at it through his lens for a minute. I was like, fuck, that's pretty tragic. So all of a sudden I could come from empathy and compassion and more of an unconditional love. And in that love, I still think it really sets you free to forgive. And so it's amazing that you've done that.
Yeah, you Jose, you strike me, and I think you've said a few things about being quite emotionally in tune or energetically in tune and being in touch with that. And just tell me about that process, because to me it sounds like you had kind of, and this is what a lot of us do, like we're in good company, we're quite sensitive men, us three, emotionally, and we shut that down based on what happens to us when we're young. And like you said, you even said you numbed yourself, started dissociating. So has that been, what's that experience been like, reconnecting with, your emotions again?
I mean, to understanding that emotions are normal. That I'd rather experience the emotions than to numb them. And I'd rather go through the emotions of the day than to not feel anything. I know what it feels like to be numb and to want to take I'm never going back there. And I appreciate being able to feel every day like that. People talk down about don't be emotional, your emotions, don't talk about how you feel. That's what makes us human. If we didn't have our emotions, we'd be robotic. But the emotional factor that we have, that's what gives us the zest, the zest in life. And a lot of, now I'm happy to be able to experience it. But I do remind myself, like, I do cry. And I'm like, hey, I remember not just, not feeling anything. So I go through the range of emotions now, and I am in tune with them. And I feel like that's normal. That's what life's supposed to be like, at the end of the day. And but we're taught to suppress our emotions at every corner.
Did you numb yours? You said you numbed them as a kid, so you shut off internally, I imagine. When you got to a bit older in life, did you use medication, whether it was prescribed or non-prescribed, drugs, alcohol, pills?
Yeah, I was heavy drink. I quit drinking, but I was an alcoholic beyond a doubt. And I struggled with alcohol addiction, and it ran rampant. My dad's out, but my dad has his drinking issue. I picked up on it, and I felt like in a weird way, I felt like when I drank, that's when I could feel. And it's actually like, it was just, you know what I mean? Where I could, and it was like, but I can feel that not drinking, but I used drinking as like, I felt like I could connect with people more, or I could.
Well, that was the gateway to feeling, because people cut themselves. Harming is a way of feeling. So
exactly, it was. But that's what I use. I use, like, for my anxiety, I would take a few shots, and all it did was make it worse. And then, but it was just all the alcohol did was postpone and then make it worse. I'm getting worse, not getting better, except I'm not knowing how worse I'm getting because I'm numbing myself even more. But finally, I got a DUI, and I had to stop drinking. And finally, I was able to look at my life and process what was happening, and to see, like, my life is in shambles right now. And at the very minimum, I can't drink. And that started a process, of sobriety. And, that's the first time I went to therapy. It was the first time I talked to a therapist. It was the first time I really started writing down my emotions, because I had, the way I used to deal with it was drinking. Now I had to find other outlets. Like, my back was against the wall, but, the things that I found to work for me, I just kept on doing them, and I do them to this day.
And what things are those? You said maybe writing out your emotions. Is journaling a part of your practice? How do you do that?
Yeah, I journal every day. It's definitely part of my practice. If I'm feeling a certain way, I don't hesitate to talk to Ralph about it, to my sisters about it. I'm not here to hesitate to hold back on talking about my emotions. I saw where that got me, and like I said, I won't go down that path again. So just being open, like right now, being vulnerable. If people ask me a question, not to worry about the judgment of the answer I have, more so just worry about that my answer is true to who I am, and that it's positive, and that's it. Like, it was just a perception change, and it takes a lot to see that what the world thinks doesn't matter. What matters is that, I'm alive and I'm here and I'm healthy and I see my own worth. And once you see that, like, I'm like an old person who doesn't care what people think. He's at 33.
no fucks left.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say it takes an inner strength and an inner groundedness and being comfortable in your own skin. But yeah, it also takes being old and giving no fucks as well. So
yeah.
Hey, would you change anything in your life? Looking back at your past, sitting here today, would you change anything?
No. I feel that, all the things I went through, I had to go through. I wouldn't be here today without my life story the same way the other person. Like, everything worked out towards the good at the end. And I used to sit down and think, like, well, what if I had a dad growing up? Or what if my mom wasn't, I would have those hypotheticals. But at the end of the day, like, I feel like I'm in the best possible outcome given my life. So if we were to play around with all the moving pieces, like,
well, those hypotheticals aren't reality, are they? So
exactly. So I feel this is the best.
You're in the reality of what you think should, would, or could have happened instead of the reality of what did.
Yeah, so I think everything worked out for the best, and it's actually beautiful. I mean, it's not always pretty, but in the end, it's it's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, and I love what you said about, it's really night and day. And I get this, me and Nick have both been there and with clients we've worked with. And I think when we go through something like depression or anxiety or drug addiction, alcoholism, whatever, it's very hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I think once people come out the other side, we have this gratitude that wasn't there even before all the mental illness and that. I remember after my drug addiction, getting clean, and I even just took my dog for a walk, and it was like I'd walked him, my God, hundreds of times, right? Maybe thousands of times. But this time it was like a completely different experience. It was like I wasn't trying to rush and just finish the walk. It was just taking everything in. It's like the simple things in life we can become grateful for because we've been down to those depths and that darkness.
Agreed.
You can't have light without dark. You can't have life without death. You can't have love without hate. So I think what people do is think that they should be in the light all the time, and that creates this aversion to being in the dark. And when they find themselves in the dark, it creates this really negative mindset, and they beat themselves up. And I don't know what you guys think, but just this constant ebbing and flowing. So we're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. We're going to feel great. We're not going to feel great. We're going to be emotionally stable. We're going to be emotionally retarded. If we don't accept that 24 hours has light and dark in it, then we're just going to suffer even more.
Yeah, I think, Jose, you said, like, it's not always pretty, and that's the thing. We come out the other end of this real deep darkness, but then I think managing and moving forward is understanding that shit's still going to happen. Yes, I'm going to wake up and feel like crap some days, and we just, like you said, Nick, we just keep moving through that and not beating ourselves up and just accepting that's what life is.
Okay, not punishing yourself for feeling crap or being reactive one day, or get rid of this concept that we have to be perfect, emotionless, or just emotionally positive creatures.
Yeah, agreed. I think the key part is being nice to yourself, being kind to yourself.
Self-love. That's where it all starts.
Self-love, exactly.
There's some knuckle tattoos. Self-love, maybe. You talked about your jail experience. It sounds a bit different to Ryan's, but doing a touch over 4 years.
Hey,
I did 3 days of hard time. All right.
Hard, like this is ball and chain.
Mind you, when I was in jail for my DUI, I learned in those 3 days what it took me 4 years and some
Nick,
to learn.
Are you listening? 3 days must be the period that's the hardest.
You didn't do the 4 years part of it, Ryan. You only did the 3 days.
I did that in my personal prison. I did longer than that.
I'll stop it. I'll give you that. People hear someone's in jail and the mind automatically leaps to those of us that are ignorant that can't be good. That can't be a good experience. You hear of all the terrible stuff from TV shows and movies and whatever. But you said you spoke to your brothers in there and your friends, You took a lot out of that. So can you just explain a little bit what it was like?
Looking back at it now from this lens, it's terrifying. But when you're 18 years old and all you really know, you grew up in a violent household, the gangs, violence again, and that segues into prison, just more violence. And what it is since you're numb, it's normal. You have to numb yourself, because if you can't live like that. So, but we've already gotten used to living like that. So when we're in prison, it's an extension of of us almost.
So there was a familiarity there, was there?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And that's what it is for most of us in prison. It's a familiar. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You build whole rationales as to why it's okay that this guy got stabbed halfway to death. You build whole rationales to justify things that are wrong, so that you don't have to feel those emotions, so that you don't have to feel bad, that you don't have to have, so you make systems that are wrong. And being in prison, it gave me a lot of insight. I've always been a ponderer, and being in there and seeing the violence and the gangs that I was a participant in, it just made me question, man, none of this really makes sense. This person hates you just because you're from this gang. This guy hates you just because you're from that gang. This guy hates you because you're black. This guy hates you because you're white. It's just hate in general. And hate knows no race.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's highly irrational.
Exactly. And the hate permeates those walls. Yeah, it was intense. I took a lot of lessons, but I also learned, I was able to gain perspective when I talked to my friends and I would hear their stories, and I would contrast that against mine, and I was able to see hey, at the end of the day, we're all going through our own personal stories, and I was able to be able to put myself at least in my mom's shoes and say, man, she was dealing with a bunch of stuff. As far as in prison, I feel I always knew that, hey, everyone's tattooed up, and what I see is we see a persona. We don't see the person, because no one there feels safe to be themselves, because we have to be this gang member. I'd rather you see a threat of violence than to you see the inner kid that I am, who's just really hurt. You know what I mean? And everything's negative, and we twist the negative to thinking it's okay, and it's not right. And it's intense, and it's a whole different world with a whole different set of rules.
Do you want to take what you're doing now back into the prisons? Do you want to help prisoners who've been incarcerated to realize there's so much value in who they are and their story?
Yeah, because in there I felt luckily I had my sisters who would visit me, and even my mom, who I blame, would write me letters, and because I had that, I think in prison you forget who you are, and you turn into a person that you really weren't meant to be. So you morph into what the environment is morphing you into. Luckily, I had my sisters, and they would visit me, and I'd in my head, I'd be I'm not this tough guy. I'm their little brother. People love me. When I have friends inside the prison yard who nobody visits them, nobody writes them. Seeing that, I am fortunate in a lot of ways, in more so ways than a lot of people who I was locked up with. And it's just, if you didn't know, I'm writing a book, and we're publishing it in November. But one of the things I say that always stuck with me in there is, one, I always felt that we were forgotten. But we're somebody's brother, we're somebody's sister, we're somebody's son. Somebody's connected to somebody who's behind bars. But when we're behind bars, we all lost sight that, our story has value, not from our gang, not from the things we participate in, but because, at one time we were all kids and innocent ones. We weren't, we didn't just wake up and decide, hey, I'm going to live a life of crime. That's just the way life transpires. but that's not who we have to be. You know, we don't have to stay in that train of thought, and we don't have to stay down in our own minds, and we don't have to devalue ourselves. And because if you're getting your value from your gang, which I did too, you know, it's so twisted, but we don't know any better. And like we said, the first thing is talking about it. And once you're okay with talking about it, like there's whole different levels of change that can happen, but you can't hold it in. And in prison, everybody's holding everything in. And that's why when the violence happens, it's intense, because it's the outleash of all that pent-up aggression, all those pent-up emotions. And it's, you know...
Yeah,
Mandela said education is the most powerful weapon we have in which to change the world. So I think educating these blokes that they can talk and open up and express and own their stuff. And I think we need to send them the John Farnham song, The Voice, Ryan, because he was talking about we're all someone's daughters, we're someone's sons, we're all someone's...
Yeah.
I think it would probably resonate.
I had the visual then of, like, you know, the prison, and there's all these, you know, dudes walking around. There's like, they're just a little, like, you know, 5-year-old innocent who's been hurt.
Yeah.
But they're wearing the big suit of a big tattooed, muscly dude, and all of them are desperate to take this suit off, but like you said, Jose, they don't know how. Yeah,
but
and through this education,
they're wearing that suit to protect the 5-year-old, and they're going to protect it at any cost.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. But at the end of the day, we're just desperate to all take that off and connect.
So incarcerating people as a form of punishment, it doesn't seem like it's working. It doesn't seem like a very good system. I think it seems like we need more healing than isolating, putting all these hurt people together. What are your thoughts?
I was listening to, sorry, before you jump in, Jose, I was listening to Russell Brand recently, and he was going into all the prisons and doing talks and speaking to them, and he goes, when I first started going into the prisons, I'm like, I'm going to go in and there's going to be just these intense, you know, people and evil, you know, killers or that kind of thing. He goes, I just saw a whole room of mentally ill people who were just crying out for help.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
So do you reckon we need more healing or more incarcerating people?
I mean, I believe these are, I mean, man, that's a question. I believe in justice at the end of the day as well. You know, I believe if you hurt somebody, you know, there needs to be justice. But the root of that
healing
justice,
be a part of that process, though?
Healing has to be a part of it, or else there's no rehabilitation.
Exactly.
You know, how do we find a way to put that into the prison system? Like, you know,
Johan Hari did the same thing with the drug thing. Has, do you want to share that?
I think it should be in there. Like at the very least, like have therapists in there, have group mandatory. Because in prison, everything is mandatory. I wouldn't even make it voluntary. You have to go talk to the therapist. You know, so everything else is mandatory. Why make that voluntary? Like, you need to go talk. You know, start there. You're right. I agree. Without healing, there's no rehabilitation. I fundamentally agree with that. How do we get into the systems? Like, you know, man, that's a great question. That would take, you know, definitely much more deep thought. But having access to talking to someone who's willing to listen to you, and then beyond that, you know, making a support group and going from there, you know. But like I said, being in prison,
so many of those prisoners with a bit of training would make great therapists. You know, once they're healed and once you know, lived experience, ex-cons going back into prisons. They'd build that rapport so easily. It's not some clinician sitting there with glasses and a notepad. It's you know, someone sitting there going, man, I was in that cell over there, and you know, I know what you're doing. Yeah. And it just seems the easy path, just to chuck people in and lock them up, and we'll deal with them later. It's going to take more effort and more energy to put in place a system that can heal and educate. But people just aren't willing to do that. They want to, chuck humans away.
Put them in time out.
Put them in time out with other people just like you. So
see how that goes.
You know, Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'd love to talk about a bit more, what's happening now, Jose. Like, you've been going around the country, filming people, hearing about their story. I'd love to know maybe some of your takeaways from hearing all these stories, and maybe what are some of the commonalities that people are going through, or what struck you?
Well, one, people want to share their story. People feel that they're not listened to. People feel that they're unheard. That was, we had an idea that people would reach out to us and want to share their stories. We just didn't know, like, that it would be right away. And that just, reinforced what we believe, that there's people who want to share their story, and we'll listen to their story and share it. Within the stories, finding that each person is truly unique. The delivery, like when I was depressed, like, oh, I'm just the same like everybody else. They're the same. Like, we have big things where we are the same, and there's those big similarities. But when you get into the nuance, uniqueness, seeing that in each interview, and no interview is the same. Shocked how open people are to talk about what they've been through. That lets me know that people need to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, one of the big things, like a lot of the work that I do, is working out what people's underlying belief systems are, mainly their belief systems that are causing all these issues in life. And one of the big ones, like we see obviously a lot, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, I don't love myself, but also I'm not heard, is massive. It's so rife. Like in pretty much nearly every female that I've worked with, they have a belief that they're not heard, and a very, very high percentage of men as well. And it's like we all have this story that we want to get out, but we just don't feel worthy of someone listening to our stuff because we minimize who we are as a person.
I think it's being acknowledged. Being heard is being validated and being acknowledged. I think that's the deeper underlying thing that I've found with people. It's they've got a story, but it's that my story has value, and it has validating it validates me and acknowledges me that I exist.
That comes back down to this having inherent value, doesn't it? Because it's like, you're right, if the person who doesn't feel heard doesn't feel acknowledged, and so what kind of person doesn't feel heard or acknowledged? Someone who has no value. Because, like, if I've got no value, why would anyone want to hear about me?
Yeah.
Did the humans of New York sort of help you guys in a way to understand that people want to share their stories? Because there's the humans of Melbourne now that the dude goes around and talks to people on the street and listens to their stories and shares it on social media. Did that influence you, or did you know about that much?
I couldn't. You said the what in New York?
The humans of New York. The social media.
Right.
Have you come across that at all?
Yeah, I have. Actually, when we initially came up with the concept, I'd never heard of humans in New York. They're like, yo, humans of New York does the exact same thing. I was like, what? So I looked up humans in New York, and, fundamentally it was the same idea as far as execution, but we get much, much deeper. We get into the person. We get into the person, not just the aesthetic, not just a story, not just a snippet. We want to get into the story of the actual inner person, of who they are.
And how long are the chats that you have? How long, roughly?
They can go from 45 minutes to an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how if it keeps on going, it keeps on going.
And do you stop people from ruminating? Because a lot of the time when people haven't been heard for such long, they've held onto this story for such a long time, they want to, when they finally come to be able to speak about it, they want to dwell in it and they want to soak in it and submerge in it, which really isn't healthy. So do you have to carefully manage them to not let them ruminate and just to let them share in a healthy manner?
I think if they do ruminate in it within the interview, it's usually not that long. We have a set of questions that everybody gets answered. It's the same set of questions. Everybody answers them differently. We do go through traumatic experiences in their life, but we do end on a high note. We start the interview with tell me a little bit about your childhood, but then what were your dreams as a child? We end the interview with that hope of still achieving those dreams, that, hey, you had this dream as a kid, so you felt that before. What's your dream as an adult? And I think the beautiful part of the actual interview is when we both sit there and they verbalize and visualize their new dream as an adult. And in that moment, there's hope. And, what happens after that, I'm not sure. But within that time, we get, we end on a high note as to where, like, hey, look, yeah, this is just what happened. But this doesn't have to define you. It's a part of you. But you decide that you really take that ownership of your story, and you understand that you're the main character, not anybody else. So you got to, take the steps to achieve who you want to be in your story. And in that moment, I think, I for sure believe, and I see, a spark in the person's eyes when they're like, hey, yeah, I've been through all these things, but you know what? There's still a positive note to it. There's still hope. And, so yeah,
that's awesome.
You guys are like a catalyst for change, really, aren't you? You sort of come along, interview these people, and hopefully open them up and expose them back to their dreams and get them connected with that, and hopefully they create some shifts.
Yeah, because it's like it's important for people to realize that we can still have dreams. Like we all have these dreams as a kid. I wanted to be a AFL footy player and play cricket for Australia, both at the same time, right? But then we lose that because we become an adult and everything gets very serious, and we're like, oh, I'm not going to have dreams now. I just have to, go to my shitty job that I don't like or whatever.
Exactly.
It is. What was your dreams as a kid, Jose?
My dreams I always wanted to be an architect.
Architect, right.
I want to be an architect. But as soon as I started getting into math classes, I knew I had to redirect.
Not for me.
Well, you're an architect in a different way now, Jose.
Architect for change.
I like to say that I build things in people's hearts. So it's
exactly. It's beautiful.
I always wanted, I like looking at beautiful buildings, and I wanted to build beautiful buildings. And the way architecture is set up is that it's not for people who aren't good at math, apparently. So
that's bullshit. That's stupid.
You're building beautiful people, which is far more important.
Way more important.
How do you guys fund what you're doing? You travel around the States. You're going to travel internationally. How are you government funded, or are you got sponsors?
No.
Or how are you
so
guys?
That's where when I initially had the idea, this was, and I came to Ralph, which I think I'm quite sure you guys are going to interview shortly.
Set up a time to have Ralph on, yep.
Definitely.
We just wanted to have the number one brother on first, get that done.
Getting Ralph depends on what you tell him after this. You might get off this and go, those Australian dudes, man, don't go near them.
I'm gonna say, you know what? Hey, I tested it out. It's not for you, Ralph.
That's not for anybody.
But the way we fund it is we fund it ourselves. We knew going in that we would have to spend a good amount of cash. At the end of the day, I think we're driven by something bigger than ourselves at this point, and that's the power behind it. It's the power behind the message that we don't care how much money we have to spend, we'll spend it. Whatever money we spend for travel, we'll get it done. Whatever money to travel international, we'll get it done. Money's not an issue at this point, not because the finances are there, was because that if we need money, we'll go and work for it. We'll get it, whether it's out of our own jobs, our own savings, or whatever. But right now, we have to fund it, and that's what we're doing.
So you guys have got your own employment, and you put your wages towards this.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
And let's talk about.
I'm lucky if I'm at 3 digits at any point in the month. So as soon as the money's in, it's out. But honestly, I haven't been happier. So.
Yeah, and I think that when we are on a mission, and I'm sure you're the same, Nick, I can feel your passion and your energy coming through as you talk about this. And when we're on that path and that mission, I think things tend to align, and if this is meant to happen, that's when money ends up in the account and we can keep moving forward. And I have no doubt that'll happen for you and continue to happen.
The payback is that you're in service, I think, and that's a beauty of this is you are serving others, and that's where the reward lies for you, mate.
Yeah, I love that. Let's just quick before we wrap up. You mentioned already book coming out in November. Jose, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, the book's called Love, Faith, and Violence: The True Song and Story.
Good name. I like that.
Essentially, it's me going through my from my childhood all the way to my joining a gang, prison, and then it ends at my prison release. And it's going through my life through the lens of my emotions. So the way I write, I emphasize writing through the emotions so that the reader can feel what I'm feeling during those events of my life. That's why it's called a song and story, because a lot of times I break into the lyric form in it. And it's essentially me answering the questions I ask the people I interview just in the narrative form. So,
yeah, I love that. I love that. And where do you see We Are All One Story going, let's say in the next 2, 3, 4 years?
Oh, we have big. I mean, we dreamed a big dream. We definitely want to not just share stories from people in the U.S., but from people around the world. We definitely want to carry this message as far as we can, and as long as we can. We definitely decided that this was a lifetime commitment for us, not just for me, but also for Ralph. And we're in it for the long haul. And we think that we'll see the numbers come when they come. But right now, we're just worried about the work.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. And whereabouts can people find you? People who are listening who want to check you guys out, where's the best place for them to see some of these stories and videos?
If you want to see the actual full interviews, you can go to our YouTube channel. We are all one story. If you want to see how I break the interviews down in snippets, which is not, in its full context, you can see that through our Instagram account at We Are All One Story, or you can check us out on our website, weareallonestory.net.
.net. Awesome, awesome. Nico, anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, just can you put Melbourne, Australia on your itinerary when you decide to go
Of course, you know what?
I know we're a long way away.
Yeah.
we would love to have you, Jose.
Definitely, I would love to meet up when I'm out there, and I do plan on being out there. I do plan on being.
That's awesome,
Come
man.
on
You
down
let us
under,
know.
Mate. We'll send you this song by John Farnham. He's like the Australian icon, and you're the
But
voice.
in order for me to go out there, it has to be worth it, which means I have to interview you guys.
Hey, me and Nick love talking about ourselves.
That
won't be a problem.
We could never open up.
Look, me and Nick, we could get about 100 people lined up down here pretty fast, I think.
Yeah.
Only four.
4. All right.
Yeah.
Me, Nick, you choose one, Nick, and I'll choose one, and then we've got 4.
All right, we'll bring a date.
Be awesome.
Bring a date.
That'll be awesome.
Mention that. First date, where are we going?
It'll be
First
bonding.
date, where are we going? We're going to sit in front of a camera and tell our life story. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Pick someone else.
Open up all your wounds. You ready?
Yeah, you ready?
You only bring the date if you want to marry her. That's a serious step right there.
All right, Jose, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. This has been a real pleasure talking to you, mate. And we are looking forward to everyone listening, checking out We Are All One Story. We're looking forward to hopefully chatting to Ralph in a couple of weeks and getting his perspective, because I know he's got an amazing story just like yours. Different but similar challenges and obstacles just like you're finding with your story. So, yeah, we really appreciate you and what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you all next week. Peace out.
Peace.